Hello everyone, and welcome to the Improving Scottish Football podcast. My name is Kieran Hennigan. Today I'm joined by football coach and analyst John Walker and Scottish football correspondent for The Times, Michael Grant. So today we are mainly going to be talking about the revolution at Aberdeen, which is very exciting and feels like the big story, I guess, of Scottish football this year. Please do like, share and subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. And also please feel free to get in touch as well. DMs are open on Twitter. You can email us improvingscottishfootball@gmail.com. Maybe you'd like to suggest a partnership or suggest a guest or a topic or whatever else. Please do feel free to get in contact. So to kick things off, a big welcome to both of you, Michael and to John, of course. I think most of you listening will probably know John by now. So I don't need to go into too much detail about you, John. But Michael, do you mind giving us a brief introduction and telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. I've been at the Times, Kieran, for the last 9 years. I've been covering Scottish football full-time since about the mid-90s. Started out in the Highlands and then moved to Aberdeen. I was the Aberdeen correspondent really for the P&J for a couple of years, couple of seasons. And then I came down to Glasgow to work at the Sunday Herald and then the Herald, and then since 2015 the Times. And I've covered 3 World Cups, 5 European Championships, and it feels like about 400 Scottish Cup and League Cup finals. And some of your listeners and viewers might have been unfortunate enough to have heard me on Radio Scotland occasionally as well. But I feel like I've been around forever, but this is an exciting podcast for me to be on, given the topic.
Good stuff. So it's fair to say you're an Aberdeen fan?
Yep, absolutely. And I can't be accused of being a glory hunter because I started supporting Aberdeen in the mid-70s when I was very young, and we had won one trophy in the previous 19 years, I think, and it was predating Fergie, predating Billy McNeill. It was just about the time Ali MacLeod was the manager. So it was a blessed time to become an Aberdeen fan, given my age at the time. My whole school years were unbelievable, really, in that sense. But listen, I've had some years of suffering to do in the second half of my life. But that's where the Aberdeen thing came from. My parents were both Aberdeen supporters.
Cool. Well, let's not dwell too much on the past, because certainly in the past few years it has been mixed, shall we say? But right now we're hopefully in a really exciting time, not just for Aberdeen, but for all of Scottish football. It is absolutely brilliant to see another club doing so well. So you're a season ticket holder. What have the actual games been like to attend? What's the kind of atmosphere, and what have you been like seeing on the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, the atmosphere and the crowd sizes have just grown and grown, Kieran, as you can see. The last 2 in particular were the Hearts game and the Dundee United game, and the next game is Rangers. That'll be a sellout as well. There is real energy at Pittodrie at the moment. The noise and the colour from the supporters has been terrific. I mean, I think I know the Aberdeen support well enough. It can be a pretty slow support to mobilise sometimes. They're not an easy support to please, but the start to this season has been so exceptional that has really caught the imagination of the city, really, and you're seeing it now. I've noticed in the last 3-4 weeks there's been more of a kind of national interest and UK interest. I've seen Football Focus did an item on Aberdeen, Radio 5 have done items on Aberdeen, so it's just growing, and it's because it's a story, and it's different, and we have had teams start very well in Scotland before, including Aberdeen and Hearts. I'm talking about the non-old firm teams. And it tends to peter out. And this may peter out as well. But at the moment, I think we can enjoy it and we can take energy from it and take inspiration from it, because it's been really exciting, and it's been different.
John, what have your impressions been of Aberdeen so far?
So I think, Kieran, before we started recording, we were talking about the fact that you and I, this isn't a reactionary thing. So I know you were saying there, Michael, that the football focus and people will be doing bits. Kieran and I spoke about this about 5 weeks ago, about wanting to do a bit on Aberdeen. We wanted to build it for the week that's coming up for the reasons that what's about to happen, the Rangers game, the Celtic semi-final. So it was very deliberate in when we wanted this on. Back when Aberdeen announced that Warnock wasn't keeping the job and Levin wouldn't be given the job full time, I remember Stephen Robinson being the favourite to get the job. And for me, it reeked of a Jim Goodwin 2.0. It reeked of another uninspiring Scottish football appointment. It reeked of run of the mill, nobody with any imagination, nobody with any thought, nobody with any even inkling to look out there to see what was maybe available. The minute the Jimmy Thelin rumour started, I watched two Elfsborg games on Y-Scout and I was like, this guy's got a totally different thought process to what we see in Scottish football. Aberdeen haven't massively. So when I watched the Parkhead game, it was familiar what I seen Aberdeen doing, dropping into a low to mid block, very structured. But what I did see is any time it fell with the keeper or defenders, there was purpose with the ball. It wasn't let's waste 70 seconds and try and breathe. It was how quickly can we counter on Celtic and attack. And that's something that's totally different to what I see with almost every other team in Scottish football outside the Old Firm. And that's why I said to Kieran, this is why I actually fear Aberdeen now, because it's kind of a perfect storm when they play Rangers and Celtic. They seem comfortable not to have the ball and terrifying as soon as they regain it. Is that what on top of Parkhead? Because I've only seen a couple of games as to what we're actually seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, John. And I mean, obviously, when it became clear that it was going to be Thelin, you read up on him and as you say, you watched performances, but I read more about his style, and I thought this sounds great, but it will take time to apply in on a new team in a new country and entirely new environment to him. And I think that's been one of the things that I've found most impressive is about how quickly it's been done. I mean, Aberdeen are playing exactly the way we read and you watched Elfsborg playing, and it's like I don't even know how you've got a coaching background. I don't even know how a manager can do that so quickly. I mean, what in terms of what he's actually doing in the training sessions. Yeah, I mean, Aberdeen. One of the things that maybe doesn't get enough attention, in my view, is the work rate and the intensity of the performances. I mean, to me, that's going through the roof compared to most of the Aberdeen teams I've watched in recent seasons. They close down really quickly. There's a real kind of snap about them, and Thelin needs that to win the ball back, and to start these kind of quick transitions and these quick moves to create chances. But he's getting it out of them, and they don't seem to be a team that's tiring, which I would have thought maybe that kind of would be such a kind of physically and even mentally demanding thing, because you've got to concentrate, but they seem to be able to kind of survive for 90 minutes. They've scored quite a lot of late goals. Saw it the other day. The Dundee United game was 86 minutes. 84 minutes, I think. The Ross County winner was 95. The Hearts game was 88. And another thing that's contributed to that, and you see this with Celtic and to a lesser extent with Rangers, is kind of impact substitutions. He's bringing on people in the second half who are making a big difference in matches. That's kind of unusual for a non-Old Firm team to be able to do that, because normally you see a drop-off in quality between the starting 11 and the squad. And, listen, we'll cover it all, I'm sure, but one of the impressive things about him is he's increased the quality of the squad by getting performances out of guys that weren't playing well last season. So suddenly the squad that looked pretty thin now looks a bit better because the bench has got options on it.
Yeah, I always remember that. The first time Brendan Rodgers came to Celtic, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, the way he enhanced what he already had, and all the chat at the time was that is the sign of a great coach, being able to take, kind of average players and just get them to step up. So I think that's a huge positive sign.
So there was so many things there, Kieran. I've just been noting down some of the stuff as Michael was talking there. From the coaching stance, the reason a lot of teams in my current team, like I'm going to change being a Rangers fan. I would have done that I would have done that a long time ago if I had that within me. But I'm here for the long Stockholm syndrome. I'm here for the long haul. Is it's not hard for a manager to put the blueprint on a team. It just requires a clear identity and philosophy and insistence on it. The reason you don't see it a lot is because a lot of coaches, believe it or not, don't have it. They just do boxes, possession games, a bit of shaping, let's go play a game. And a lot of that falls from all the things you talked about. It's a cycle. Once you have that, you have a drop off in quality when the subs come in, because unless you insist on your right back playing a specific way all the time and you work on that in training all the time, if you change right back for right back, you should get the same result, even if the quality is dropping. If you change centre forward for centre forward, you should get the similar result. If you change winger for winger, you should get a similar result. The problem we have in Scottish football is there is no style of play. So sub 1 comes on for sub 2 and nothing changes, because it's just, you're just hoping this guy comes on and is having a good 20 minutes. Aberdeen don't have that now. When they brought on, they put McGrath in one, brought off Nisbet, moved Sockler up one. They changed the team around a little bit. Nothing really changed, but everyone was doing the same jobs against Celtic, but they just looked so much more potent. But they were doing the same things.
They were, John. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but you're right. They were trying to do the same thing in the first half as well. It's kind of been reinvented now that Aberdeen were kind of all over the place in the first half and team good in the second. That's not quite true. I mean, they were still trying to do the same core principles in the first half. It just wasn't as effective, and it got picked off.
See if Celtic against Borussia Dortmund had scored the goal Aberdeen did for that first goal, it would have been everywhere. That not even just the pass from McGrath is unbelievable, the technique, the quality in that. Nielsen's pass into McGrath is unbelievable. It starts from Mitov. Yep. Aberdeen teams of old, and see when you talked about the energy of players, whether you're dealing with a Lowland League East Kilbride or a West Premier Darvel or Aberdeen or Barcelona, one thing players want to know is, see when we get possession of the ball, can we have the ball for a little bit? and what's happened too long in Scottish football is, see those players like Jamie McGrath, Leighton Clarkson, quality players that Aberdeen do have, because when you look at these squads and you go in and watch them train, these are all like elite footballers that have come through top academies. They aren't terrible footballers that have ended up at Aberdeen. They've got potential to go. Rangers fans are seeing what Connor Barron, who didn't play regularly for Aberdeen, does to a Rangers team with the quality of players and being able to play with the ball. What happens with these players is, if you're in Aberdeen and go to Parkhead and you lose a game 6-0 like they did last season, and you're lucky if some of the players have had 5 touches of the ball, you go, even if we work our bollocks off for the next 5 minutes and get through it and win a goal kick, our manager wants us to go into the middle of the park, our goalkeeper to waste 75 seconds and punt a ball over my head, and Leighton Clarkson and Jamie McGrath going, what am I meant to do here? Like, where am I doing anything?
Yep.
With Jimmy Thelin, I think it's like, no, when we win the ball back, we'll have the ball. So see that energy sapping moment, you now get to show your quality. You get to regain a bit of energy and see controlling the ball for 2 minutes. That gets you an extra 10 minutes at the end of the game that you previously didn't have at Parkhead, because you've kept the ball for a little bit and shown your own quality. There's not a problem with Scottish football. It's a problem with Scottish coaching.
Yeah.
And it reeks through the leagues. And that's why Kieran and myself, begrudgingly, obviously, because it's Aberdeen, but I'm so happy to see somebody like Jimmy Thelin be appointed, come in, and just be the positive beacon that I honestly believed at the time he would be.
It's funny because the whole narrative when they appointed him, or just around about the time of his appointment, was, we're going to have to be patient, because Aberdeen have churned through managers in the last 3-4 years. I could list them, but you know who they are, and they've tended to last a year, right? And obviously there was fears that Jimmy would take time to take time to kind of ignite and take off in Scottish football, if he did at all. So the whole narrative from the club was very much, we will be patient with this guy. We will give this time, and supporters need to stay with him as well. And I think maybe psychologically, we as supporters, we're kind of bracing ourselves for a difficult start to the season, and it would have its setbacks, and people would get on the back of it, and it would be a kind of, well, foreign managers, how often do they work in Scotland, And Dave Cormack came out with this line about wanting Thelin to be the anchor of the club for a long time. Now, easier said than done. I mean, it is results, and if the results were stinking, that becomes a very difficult thing to kind of dictate to fans that this guy will be around forever. I don't think anybody imagined it would go as well as it has so far. And I think that you're now getting into the territory of wondering how long Aberdeen will be able to keep this guy, because sadly there's an awful lot of richer clubs in Aberdeen around the game who will look at a manager who can deliver results like that and think, well, we'll take a bit of that. Thelin, I think, is a guy with he's not a restless kind of character. He's not had many clubs in his career. He could have left Elfsborg long before he did. And I don't think he'll be rushing out of Aberdeen either. But, I hope that nobody comes in for him, but they will. Because if he continues at this kind of level of impact, he's bringing eyes onto the club and he's bringing eyes onto himself.
And I think in Jimmy Thelin, what we're seeing, Kieran, is I suspect we're probably going to have a podcast very soon if Tony Bloom's deal with Heart Midlothian goes through.
Yeah,
is what we're seeing is the teams outside the old firm are maybe catching on to something that the old firm haven't had to, because their plethora of cash, with their availability to get a new manager in, sign decent players from Europe on decent money. They've not had to think. I think what we're seeing with Aberdeen is maybe the first of many who, like St John's Massimo Valacari, will go, what else is what's happening in Scandinavia? Because that's where the data-driven models came from. When I look at Elfsborg, who gave Jimmy Thelin the job at 33, they went and appointed a player that was still playing football, who wanted to do his coaching badges. They've appointed a 32-year-old midfielder who's now retired to take the job. So they're kind of continuing that model. You've got Hearts who are going down a data-driven model of potentially bringing in Tony Bloom from Brighton. I think what we're seeing is Scottish clubs catching on as to how do we get the marginal gains to catch Rangers. Maybe not Celtic. I think Celtic are probably too far ahead. But how could we catch Rangers and cause Rangers a problem? And I think it's people like Jimmy Thelin. Anytime I've heard them speak, so I was lucky enough to beat East Kilbride last year, so I've spoke to Mick and Si about what he was like in the League Cup, and they said he was really fascinating to talk to, just get a little bit about him. It was obviously very kind of your standard complimentary of what East Kilbride tried to do, what they were doing at this level and stuff like that. But they could kind of tell very quickly that this was somebody who was very switched on to football, which when you get talking to people, you realise that you can identify those people pretty quickly. And I think one of the things I really like when I hear him talk is it's very clear what the model of Aberdeen is. So Kieran and I, again, just before we started, with Scottish football and a lack of philosophy and style, teams like a St Mirren and Stephen Robertson can go and win 5 games in a row. And you go, wow, St Mirren are in really good form. But the flip side of that is they can also then go 3 wins in 20, because I don't believe they have the consistency. Jimmy Thelin could go and lose to Rangers, lose the semi-final to Celtic and lose the next league game. And I still think that Aberdeen would then go on a run of 5 or 6 games winning in a row, because there's a clear process the players now understand. It's not a case of, the confidence is shot and that style of football we didn't like is happening. Now, it's consistent and it will happen again. He had spells like that at Elfsborg where they went through tricky spells and then all of a sudden flipped the switch and they were back to playing the way they were. It's because he's a very good coach. It's very clear when you hear him talk that he understands. And I don't think any Scottish pundit, whether it be Chris Boyd or whoever, if Jimmy Thelin hit a bad spell, would hit out with the usual narrative of foreign coach, doesn't understand the league, doesn't understand the dynamics of Aberdeen fans. That stuff will just get batted away. It's just the nonsense that it is. And he will just continue with his confidence.
Yeah. The other thing I love about Jimmy is that he's worked his way up. I think that's such a positive sign, because again, this is another, I'm going to say problem. Arguably it's a problem in Scottish football, where guys get dropped into positions, into top level coaching positions, having no coaching background. And it's usually because they're a club legend, or they know the club and they know the game and they know the league and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's just fantastic when guys like Jimmy Thelin have worked their way up and they've demonstrated what they're capable of at a lower level, and they kind of earned their stripes for when they get up to the likes of Aberdeen. And I was watching the Overlap a few weeks ago, and they had Ruud van Nistelrooy on it, and he had the chance to go in as like a head coach somewhere. And he actually said, no, like I need to earn that. I need to work my way up. And he deliberately went in at PSV under 17s level, and he earned his stripes, and then he went up to the under 19s, and eventually he took over as PSV first team coach. I don't know. There's definitely something in that kind of journey and earning the right to manage at a high level.
There is, Kieran, and I mean, I think it's one of the things that's given me comfort. As this run has gotten more exciting and carried on, it's the knowledge that he did have that kind of body of work behind him in Sweden. That, as John touches on, it convinces you that this guy, it's not a flash in the pan with this guy. Now, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I am realistic about Scottish football, and the kind of, at the risk of sounding, pompous, I mean, the kind of macroeconomics of it are spectacularly against Aberdeen being able to last the distance with Celtic. That's not been kind of downbeat or anything, but you just look at football and you know where the winners come from when the financial gap is as big as it is. But to echo what John said, Thelin's legacy for me won't be whether Aberdeen win the league, because I can't see it. You can't imagine that they'll be able to sustain this against such a financially and footballing sense powerful Celtic. But his legacy will be having transformed Aberdeen in terms of where they were last season, what he's done to the club in terms of professionalism, attitude, mentality. The basically the strength of the squad. He suddenly created a squad that looks really quite impressive. And it's got a response from the fan base. Hopefully, it'll generate money. It'll certainly generate gate receipts. Hopefully, it gets them into Europe. Obviously, we don't have the kind of safety net of guaranteed group stage football anymore, but let's see. So, I think that's what I will judge Thelin on. So whether they do fall short eventually when they have to run into regular games against the Old Firm, and Celtic will be favourites, of course, for this League Cup semi-final, and they'll to go the distance in the Scottish Cup, they'll have to take on probably Rangers and Celtic again. And it's not to rule them out, because you saw what they could do at Parkhead, and Hampden isn't as formidable as Parkhead. But I already feel that I'll be able to confidently kind of judge and positively judge Thelin on the fact that he'll have turned Aberdeen around and made them a really credible club again, because they haven't been that for some time.
And John, I'm sure you'll be able to touch on this as well. The slight counterpoint on it is that Aberdeen so far have been massively overperforming their stats. Is that fair? In terms of shots on target, shots on goal. I think a lot of them are going in way above what you would eventually expect that to kind of round out as.
Yeah, but it's I wouldn't say it's overperforming. I'd say it's clinical in a different way. So if I looked at Hearts last year, for example, one of the big things I kept saying about Hearts was they faced a lot of shots in their own goal and kept a lot of clean sheets with that. And Lawrence Shankland outperformed his XG by double. So Hearts had the fewest big missed chances in the league. So see, for people that go on about stat nonsense like myself, see when you put those three things into a computer, you're keeping a lot of clean sheets but facing hundreds of shots. Your main striker's taking more chances than he should, and you are missing the fewest big chances in the league, which means you aren't getting a lot of chances. If any one of those three things fall apart, you don't keep clean sheets, or your main striker doesn't score goals, you end up bottom of the league and sack your manager before October. I don't see that in Aberdeen. I see what Aberdeen are doing is scoring a lot of the similar goals. They're maybe not creating a lot of those chances, but the goals are very similar, which means there is clearly a team that work on a pattern on how they get the goals and how they get players into those positions. And for me, the biggest concern as a non-Aberdeen fan would be what happens when Aberdeen really click and get more of those chances every game. For me, it seems logical that they score more goals and win more games and cause teams more problems.
I was going to say that. I do think there is the potential for them to improve. I mean, we're still really early in Jimmy Thelin's time here. I mean, he hasn't played every team in the league. He hasn't played Rangers, hasn't played Hibs. Listen, who knows? Maybe it'll come unstuck and it'll kind of, teams will find a way of disrupting them a bit more. But I don't know. I mean, I still do think that there's more to come in this team, and there is. And this is kind of emotional, passionate stuff, which you guys maybe will roll your eyes about. But I think the team unity that they have counts for something. I mean, when you saw Duke making that goal line clearance at Parkhead last weekend, I mean, the reaction was like, it was so strong. It was sort of a really visceral reaction, like as if they'd scored a goal. And that's because this is a team that is fighting like buggery to protect its run. It's still unbeaten. And also, you touched on Peter leaving there, John. I mean, Aberdeen's run actually predates Thelin to some degree. They haven't lost a game in 90 minutes for 7.5 months. It's ridiculous. The only defeat they've had in 7.5 months was to Celtic on penalties in the Scottish Cup semi-final. So there was a bit of a foundation there, but. There's about half a dozen of the team, or maybe five or six of the team are new, and they're all making good contributions. And also, he's getting performances out of Papa Gay up until he was injured. Shaden Morris was really instrumental in the Dundee United game. Peter Ambrose, still got my doubts, but he scored the winner against Dundee United. Even Rubišić. I think has really, really stepped up his game this season as well at centre half. So yeah, listen, I mean, I do think there's potential for them to really kind of solidify and be a team that, let's just say, a non-Old Firm team that can finish with a really high points total.
I think, Kieran, there was a couple of things that Michael said there that was really, really important for me. He talked about the unity of Aberdeen, and then you went on to mention Duke celebrating that. Duke was laid back for pre-season, and you could smell the Scottish media. Going, this is the first thing we can get this new coach on, this new foreign coach that does. They know our media systems. We can get him on this. We can get him to hang a player out to dry, put stake, and show what type of manager he is. Is he an authoritarian? Is he somebody that's going to discipline? Took it completely away, even sent Nicky Devlin out to do the press conference, and it was very clear the manager was like, footballers misbehave, man. Footballers go AWOL. This is like, it just seemed like it was somebody that was like, I've dealt with this before, it's not a big deal. Footballers have disappeared to international duty and no came back for pre-season before. He's back now. He's said to me he's happy to go for it. And I think when you deal with that without an authority, I think everyone just buys in when they realise that, yes, you know what? See the next player that does it, you could have a shitty time and need a week away and do your own personal thing and lose. The manager's going to be by you. And I think there's loads of different ways to build that. And I think his way is we will all stay together no matter what happens. Like, if Duke needed that extra week to go AWOL and do whatever happened, I'll still support him. And then you get Duke back in the team and you get somebody who's potentially a 15 goal a season winger in the team who's totally bought in, and all the players buy into that. I just think that's just one thing that I've noticed. I think he just seems to hit all the right notes for me as a man manager as well.
One of the things I heard was that, I mean, he hadn't worked with Duke last season, so he didn't know him as an individual or as a person or a character. And I mean, Duke, it did cause the club a hell of a lot of grief with his behaviour and, going completely AWOL for a long, long time. But when he came back on the scene, Thelin took a handful of senior players in and said to them, "What do you think? Is this guy worth the hassle?" And I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically, how will this be received in the dressing room if we take this guy back in and give him a second chance? So it was, your Shinnies and Devlin and McGrath and these guys, a handful of them. And I think they kind of went, well, yeah, if he's genuinely contrite and he wants to come back, then he's got the talent that justifies us doing that. And I thought that was impressive because it showed that Thelин's not a kind of domineering guy who has to assert his authority. It was a kind of consensual kind of thing. It's like, let's see what the guys think, And it's also showing them respect, isn't it? So you think all of them would go, right, okay, this guy, he cares about what we think about this, and the outcome was Duke was brought back in and his attitude seems to be pretty good, and his performances are improving week on week as well. So just a little thing, but I thought that showed a guy, as John says, that's maybe handled something like this before and is comfortable with it,
And I think the other thing you touched on, and it was something that I'd noticed, Rubicic was always somebody that I watched and thought, I wonder what he would be like in a better team, because I always thought in the little moments that Aberdeen did pass the ball about, I was like, he actually is a good progressive pass between lines. He's actually quite a good diagonal ball, which I like in defenders. And then obviously the things that were stood out was he was an absolute animal in the box. So that was already ticked off for me. So I was always kind of like going, I wonder what he would be like if he got a good coach. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Obviously, when I got wind that Rangers were signing Conor Barron, I watched a lot of Aberdeen under Peter Levin. And although they were playing the bottom half sides because the split had happened, the Celtic game was a big one. And you could see a totally different Aberdeen. Aberdeen were racking up 67% possession in most of those games. Yep. So under Levin, you already seen a kind of change in philosophy. And I think it's probably good that you pointed that out to people who have maybe only been watching Jimmy Thelin, and this is a podcast about pretty much Aberdeen and Jimmy Thelin. But him keeping Peter Levin as well has been an absolute masterstroke as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. I agree with you. It's just that old thing about, you do need a guy who knows the scene, and if you're going to Ibrox or Parkhead or Tynecastle, whatever, just a guy who knows the players you're going to be up against and knows the environment you're going to be going into and can just sort of say, here's what to expect. Also, I think Peter Levin is has shown that he's a talented coach in his own right. And I was anxious. I think it was Wraith Rovers, wasn't it, that that he might have gone to Wraith, Levin, and thankfully didn't. He turned him down. So I'm happy that Thelin got him, kind of backing him up.
I think that's probably as good a compliment to what Jimmy Thellin's maybe doing, is that Peter Levin's maybe went, I could learn here. Like, I could actually learn, because I know he's been out in Belarus and Russia, so he's been very aware of what. I don't think Peter Levin's in a rush to do anything. I think he's been very clear that he's been learning different things, and I think if he's not committed to the potential of a good first team job, he's probably seen a lot in Jimmy Thelin and went, God, I could get way more from another 9 months under this guy than I could jumping at the first job that becomes available. Because in the end, there's going to be a job that becomes, or unfortunately for Aberdeen fans, he maybe smells that Jimmy Thellin's got a bigger ceiling than previous Aberdeen coaches and goes, if I get this right, I could be going higher and higher with Jimmy Thelin. So I just think it reeks of, unfortunately from my side, I'll keep saying this, I think it just reeks of like a really positive. Unless Aberdeen lost 10 players to injury, I can't see how this quickly turns. And I think from myself, from what I've just watched this afternoon as well, by the way, I think a lot of people see on Wednesday that this isn't a flash in the pan. This is something that's actually happening right now, and it's something to take note of.
And just to clarify for the listeners, this is the Rangers St Mirren game that you attended, because we're recording on the Sunday, right?
One of the worst games of football I've ever watched in my life.
Okay, well, right. So just a heads up, towards the end of the podcast, I'm going to ask you both for your score predictions on Wednesday and for next weekend, so you can have a little mull over that in the meantime. We're obviously going to keep on talking about Jimmy and the style of play, etc., probably throughout the entire season, because this is obviously going to be really exciting for us to watch and analyse. I just want to kind of touch on the kind of wider strategy at Aberdeen, because I think there's more going on there that's worth referencing than just Jimmy Thelin, in terms of the long-term objectives, in terms of the strategy, for example, bringing through younger players or the player trading model. What's your kind of perspective about the kind of wider situation at Aberdeen, Michael?
Well, it's been interesting actually, because because of the managerial churn that has been a volatile period at Aberdeen for the last 3 or 4 years. But underpinning it, there have had quite a lot of successes in the transfer market in terms of making kind of increasingly big and lucrative sales. Obviously, Majowski was the most recent and high-profile example of that. But, you've also had Calvin Ramsey coming through the youth academy and going for good money, Scott McKenna as well, to a lesser extent, Ross McCrory and Ramadani come in and made decent profit for them. So the club, financially, the club has been growing. The corporate and commercial side is pretty strong. The next annual accounts for Aberdeen will show a record turnover of in the low 20 millions, which is kind of on a par with Hearts at the moment. And that's on the back of the Conference League run off last season. And it's on the back of selling McCrory and Ramadani and these guys. Next year's accounts will have Miovski. So there's been a lot that's been good. I mean, the club won the Under-18 Club Academy Scotland Youth League in May, lost the cup final at Rangers, so they've got a strong set of players at that age group. You'll remember the young lad Fletcher Boyd played a couple of games at the end of the season, got a couple of goals, 16 years old. Sadly, he's not really had a look in this season, because the first team has been so strong. And something that you might find interesting is I know that Aberdeen have kind of reluctantly had to kind of accept that it's harder now for them to cherry pick players from the rest of the Premier League, because what they're finding is those clubs are more switched on, and they're more aware of the value of their assets. So I don't know. I'm thinking that guys like Lewis Ferguson and Kenny McLean that Aberdeen were able to kind of pinch from Hamilton and St Mirren. Aberdeen, I think, are finding you saw Hearts doing it this summer to be fair, but I think they're finding it a little bit difficult to get the real young prospects, the guys that are just kind of breaking through, because they're more expensive. So what Aberdeen are doing is looking at other markets, and they've looked particularly at the Balkans market. So that's Majovski, Sokler, Palaversa, the Croatian lad that's was once a real prospect, and maybe again he's shown moments of real class. The Mitov, albeit he's come from St Johnstone, and there's been one or two others. So I think that is an area that their kind of scouts and their data teams are concentrating on, because they think there's some joy for them there. And it's just that old thing, isn't it? That a winning team and a clearly kind of vibrant club will find it easier to recruit players, and it will generate money and become, to a degree, self-sustaining or self-perpetuating. So I think, touch wood, I think the club is in a pretty good place at the moment. We'll not talk about the new stadium, which has kind of been hanging over Aberdeen for about three decades. Personally, I'm quite happy to stay at Pittodrie, but that's going to be put in the back burner because they can't afford it. But I think the club's pretty well run, even if it hasn't felt that way as they've churned through managers every year for the last 3 or 4.
John, what are your thoughts on it?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think if I look at Miovski, what's good about a player trading model, we can point to Miovski, Lewis Ferguson, Kenny McLean, Scott McKenna, Calvin Ramsey, players that go out the door for money, Ramadani as well, and come into Aberdeen for 18 months, 24 months, and get sold to good clubs at a good level for good money, is it'll attract young players from Europe. So when you're going to try and sign Kiskinen, who had multiple options to go elsewhere, you can kind of point to him and go, if you come here and do well, there are people that are willing to come and shop in Scottish football. We are now Aberdeen are almost it's where I'd like Rangers to be, actually, maybe with a higher level, as Aberdeen are almost a trusted seller now. If you were going on Trustpilot, you'd be like 4.8 rating, Calvin Ramsey, Lewis Ferguson, Kenny McLean, Scott McKenna. When you sign from Aberdeen, you tend to get a good player. Rangers with Conor Barron. If you take from Aberdeen Ryan Jack, you tend to get a good player of a good quality that can come in and improve your team. So when Kiskinen comes in, he's going 18 months at this club, I'll get a £6 million move. And that should be the model. That should be what all Scottish football is working towards, by the way. We should not be under any delusions that we are the end goal for anyone. Anyone that comes to Rangers, I'm more than accepting that it's a 24-month programme and you better make us money on your way to another league in the world. And I think that's what Aberdeen are doing really well just now.
I mean, the Miovski one, sorry, Kieran, the Miovski one was a classic example of that. There was a complete acceptance across the board that time had come for him to go, and from what I'm told, Thelin said that as well. He said, listen, it's right for him to move now. I'm not going to try and keep this guy around for my own obvious potential benefit to the team. The time has come for him to move on. So you saw that game at Pittodrie, which was kind of almost billed as Miovski's send-off. I mean, you don't see that very often when there is a kind of, okay, it's reluctance, but there was an acceptance and that it was time for him to go. It was pretty obvious that the move was done at that point. So, John's right that it is the textbook thing. You get a couple of years of great service out of a guy and you move him on at great profit. I mean, that is the model. It was a textbook example of the model working. And Rangers, as you know, had chances with guys like Kent and Morelos and clung on to them, and you end up with nothing.
Yep, 100%. I think Scottish clubs are slowly waking up to the current era that we're in regarding player trading models and how they should be recruiting specifically, with that in mind. And I think it has required a bit of a mindset shift, because historically we used to be, a lot stronger as a footballing nation. And even going back 15, 20 years, we would be able to hold on to some of the best talents in Europe. Henrik Larsson played at Celtic for 7 years. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. If he was to come to Celtic now, I mean, if you held on to him for 2 years, I mean, that'd be amazing. So it has required a lot of clubs to try and rethink, but obviously there's a lot of clubs still in Scottish football that aren't thinking this way. So it's nice to see that Aberdeen clearly have got their strategy in place, or they're developing their strategy. I think, the sort of countries that they are recruiting from, the Balkans, your Macedonia, Slovenia, Slovakia, etc., they are deliberately exploiting markets that not that many other clubs are looking at in the grand scheme of things. So that's exciting, and they can kind of dig out some gems, as well as hopefully bringing in some exciting younger Scottish talent. And hopefully, given the way that Jimmy Thelin is playing, a lot of young Scottish players are going to want to go to the likes of Aberdeen and try and force that move to kind of come through.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, the only kind of young Scottish player, and he's not really that young, is Jack McKenzie, I think, who's 24 maybe. And again, it all kind of cascades down, doesn't it? You've had Jack McKenzie and Nicky Devlin getting into the Scotland team, and that's another positive for the club and another asset the club can use in terms of getting players and saying, well, look, I'm not saying you get fast tracked to the Scotland team here, but there's a gateway here. So yeah, I still think it would be nice to have more young Scottish players in the team. I can't claim that there's an over representation at all. There really isn't. It's a pretty cosmopolitan squad. But I'm not going to criticise any aspect of Jimmy Thelin reign at the moment, because it's given me a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's something throughout every Scottish club in the Premiership as well. So as has been very well documented, we are lacking good Scottish talent at most clubs. Do you want to touch on that at all, John, or am I going to be opening a can of worms when we discuss that?
I think we'll open a can of worms. Maybe save that for another day.
Okay, we'll do that. Listen, before we kind of come on to the end of the podcast, is there any other kind of key points that either of you guys want to raise about Aberdeen before we kind of bring about the close?
I don't know. I guess it's just I am, as I say, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I am. Or maybe I should phrase it or frame it a different way. So I think what Aberdeen are doing, if they can keep this going, would be truly exceptional. If they can keep this level of consistency going, and the Rangers game on Wednesday will be really interesting. I'm cynical and world weary enough to know that there's a potential for a slap in the face coming in that one, because for all that. When Rangers drop points and struggle, it's always kind of presented as, crisis, and they're a mess and they can't do this and that. Rangers still win the majority of their football matches, Even a poor Rangers and Celtic team still wins most of its games in Scotland. So the idea that Aberdeen are going to have a kind of comfortable game on Wednesday night. John might disagree with me because he's just watched them play St Mirren, but I can see that being a real contest for Aberdeen. That's not to say that they can't do it, though. I think it's not a mystery to me why they're getting results. As John explained earlier on, tactically, they've got a good goalkeeper, they've got a solid back four, they've got a couple of experienced anchoring defenders in front of them. There's then creativity and pace in the attack, all of it in a kind of really confident unit which is fighting like hell for each other at the moment. That's a pretty powerful set of ingredients, especially when you've also got the fans behind them. And Thelin, for all that I think he's an intelligent manager rather than one that's kind of draws on emotion, he has topped up at the fact that the team is getting a lot of energy from the supporters, and also something else that's maybe quite interesting, Kieran, is I think that both the team and the fans have been quite calm in games so far. When it's been going against them, they've not panicked, and by God, we know what Scottish football fans are like, and we're all, or I've been guilty of it as well. You kind of start shouting and bawling in your back when it's not going your way. And I think the greatest example of that, they were pretty calm against Dundee United yesterday. But I think the bigger example of that was the Hearts game when they were losing to Hearts, which would have really hurt. But they came through it and they won with a late goal. And Thelin made a point of talking about how the support wasn't getting on the backs of the players. There's almost an element of trust there, which is kind of unheard of thing for an Arnold Firm team to kind of think, we'll probably be okay, we'll probably get through this and win, So however long this lasts, it's like being in a bloody Goldilocks zone, Kieran. It just feels like almost everything that they're doing at the moment is kind of going right. And listen, we have had setbacks. To lose Miovski was a big thing. Papa Gay is the top scorer in the league, and he's out injured for ages. Dante Polvara's missed a long time, and he's an important midfielder. Leighton Clarkson was injured. It's not just been kind of all flowers and honey. It's been there's been setbacks he's had to deal with. But by and large, everything seems to have kind of come up pretty sweet so far.
Yeah, and from a neutral's perspective, like I said at the top, it's just so exciting to see another team right up there. John, any final thoughts?
No, I think that was a great point about the players that they've missed, being 2-0 down at Celtic, being behind against Hearts and still winning and still getting those unbeaten runs. It's like, I've seen a lot of people, even after the Airdrie game in the League Cup, where they came back and won, a lot of people didn't seem sure about what he was trying to do. I think, but for me, it's just that and again, I don't want to keep reiterating and going over the same old nonsense. When you have a style of play and it's coached well, you can lose Leighton Clarkson, you can lose Papesky. The players that are coming in understand the style and understand what's been asked, and it makes it a lot easier for those replacements to come in and do a job. Yes, you will lose quality, but when it's the flip side of my team, if you lose your best players, you lose ability to play well because you don't have a style of play. That's the concern. And the biggest concern I think I'm now seeing from Rangers fans, and the ones who don't know, will know on Wednesday, is that if you come up against managers who have got a good style of play, and whatever that style of play is, because I do think Aberdeen will sit in a fairly low block and just sucker punch Rangers to death, you'll find out that when tactically inept managers are playing against people who know what they're doing, like Jimmy Thelin, I think you could see a real problem. And I think this Aberdeen side, I'm sure we're just about to go into it, are going to cause Rangers so many problems from what I've seen today.
Well, that segues us on nicely to our score predictions then. So, John, do you want to go first? What do you think for both the Rangers league game and then the Celtic Cup game next weekend?
So for the Rangers game, for me, I've got real concerns with. I can't put a score prediction. I can't come out here and say what score I think Rangers are going to beat off Aberdeen. What I can say categorically is I cannot see a way in which Aberdeen's unbeaten record goes on Wednesday. Mitov last year was one of the best shot stoppers in the league. He looks like he's continued that on Aberdeen from the stuff I've seen. Rangers seem to be clinically taking 1 or 2 chances they get out of 3 or 4. Even when it's Kilmarnock, when they only have 2 or 3 chances, they tend not to score. Rangers need a lot of clinical, taking chances and a lot of chances to score. Mitov isn't going to give them that. Aberdeen aren't going to give them that. I can't see Rangers scoring more than a goal. Aberdeen will score against Rangers. St Mirren set a really good trap today. Anytime it went full back to centre half, they all jumped and pressed. That's what I liked about Aberdeen in the second half against Celtic. It was the same press on Callum McGregor to make sure anytime they tried that pass into McGregor, they were on him and they were around him. And that's where their counter-attacks tended to happen. Rangers don't even allow that pass to happen. So it'll go back and Aberdeen will smother the press. Aberdeen will turn over a lot of balls in the halfway line and create a lot of chances through Kiskinen for Rangers. I fully, I don't know if it's emotion because of what I've just watched, I cannot see Rangers coming away from anything other than a defeat at Pittodrie, and that is horrible.
And then what about the Celtic match? Do you think they could give Celtic another good game?
Yep. I think it's what Celtic tried to do to Atalanta is what Aberdeen did to Celtic with more of a threat than Celtic did to Atalanta. Celtic later on had a few good chances against Atalanta, but more often than not they were kind of camped in. I think now that Jimmy Thelin seen what Celtic have to offer at home, being 2-0 up, they couldn't close out a game. Aberdeen, I know it was a handball right decision, but Aberdeen were unlucky not to be 3-2 up from 2-0 down. I think now that he's seen them, Peter Leven in the semi-final had a really positive result against Celtic in 90 minutes. I think Aberdeen, because you got to imagine if that game at Parkhead had went on, Celtic, if went into extra time, Celtic would have probably won it the way it was going. But I think now that Aberdeen have seen them, I think Aberdeen could cause Celtic trouble. I think that game could go extra time, definitely, is what I feel on that one. I don't know what happens after that.
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit of extra time and that. Michael, what are you thinking? Any score predictions from you?
I would really rather not give you score predictions. I think this is really... If I had known you were going to land me with this when you invited me on the podcast, I would have probably turned you down. Listen, I think it would be incredible if Aberdeen's unbeaten record is still going by the end of these two games. I do share John's general kind of view of the game in an optimistic sense, where he's pessimistic about it. I can see them causing Rangers trouble at Pittodrie. Hampden, you know, I think everything that Jimmy Thelin brings to Aberdeen, it helps them level it. You know, it helps them level it against Celtic. Celtic still bring a hell of a lot of weaponry to the game, and I think that might be too much at Hampden. But I can see them beating Rangers narrowly, and I can see them competing with Celtic and maybe going out on Sunday. But as I say, the season has been so unusual, really, and exceptional. It's difficult. It's difficult when you're kind of wrapped up in it to kind of see how others are looking at this. And I try and kind of imagine if this was Hearts or Hibs, and how, from a journalistic point of view, I'd be really excited about that, you know, just to see how long it would last, because, you know, as I say, they do tend to peter out, but there is something brewing at Aberdeen that is really, really interesting, and it'll be, I think they will go into the 70s and maybe high 70s points, you know. Now, that might still leave them quite a bit off the pace with Celtic, but, you know, that would still be a hell of a season for Aberdeen if they can keep that going, and then let's see what it takes them in the Cups.
Brilliant. Well, we will watch and find out with bated breath. So, listen, that brings an end to the podcast. Thank you so much, John and Michael, for joining me. That was a lot of fun. Thank you. For everyone listening, you're going to get podcasts coming out pretty much every couple of weeks, we hope, unless anything unforeseen happens. So every second Monday, there should be a podcast arriving wherever you get your podcasts. So just make sure you're subscribed. And like I say, please do make sure you like and share and review and all that kind of good stuff. So big thank you from me, and big thank you to John and Michael, and of course for you guys for listening.